On today's show, Koby Altman talked about the Cavs offseason, and he talked about Donovan Mitchell. We're going to sort through what he said and what it means for Mitchell's future on today's show.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. I am Chris Manning. That is Evan Dammarell. We are the Locked On Cavs podcast. As always, we have Jake Stevens producing. Before we dive into today's show, which we're going to start with Koby Altman talking about Donovan Mitchell, we're going to touch on other things Koby Altman had to say, including very aggressively shooting down a very silly report about the fact that Darius Garland was on the trade market, perhaps. I love that he seemed perplexed by that, because I was as well. And then Evan's going to pitch me on Christian Wood as someone to round out the Cavs roster. Do you want to shout out, though? I was walking around this evening, ran into a listener, a YouTube viewer, I believe, on the street named Steve. He said hello. He told me to tell Evan hello. Didn't mention Jake, which tough look for my guy Jake. But Steve, thanks for being a Locked On Cavs YouTube guy and also a Locked On Browns guy. I brought up both shows. So shout out to Steve. Evan, let's dive into...
Shout out to Steve real quick. Whoa. I'm a big fan of your work in Minecraft, so thanks for listening.
Don't know what that means, but okay. Koby Altman.
Mm-hmm.
Donovan Mitchell obviously was a point of discussion. Here's a portion of what Koby Altman had to say. Quote, "He's really, really happy here, and he'll tell you that. All I can go off is Donovan's actions and his intentions. He's with us in Vegas right now. He's super excited about the future. He'll be at the game tonight. He's been in Cleveland multiple times this offseason already." Went on to say, basically a lot about what Mitchell's future is going to come down to is winning. He wants to win here, is something Altman said verbatim. We should note that Mitchell's future is not something that this isn't they're staring down the barrel of this is the last year they have. They have this year, they have the year after that, and then there's a player option in the third year. Where this year kind of comes into play is, he is extension eligible. There's no reason for him to sign an extension. I think that should just be assumed that just financially it makes no sense for him to sign that extension right now. But Evan, what did you make of what Altman had to say about Mitchell and about where Mitchell is at with the franchise right now?
So player happiness was somewhat of a theme. Maybe consistency was a pretty major theme as well. Some notes from May's media availability for Koby Altman, just on the aspect of not making wholesale changes at the top. But he certainly did hammer home the point that Donovan Mitchell, on top of Max Strus, George Niang, Ty Jerome, and I guess anybody else the Cavs may be approaching down the line at their last two roster spots as well. That's been a thing where they focus on keeping players or having players that want to be in Cleveland. And the way Altman approached it was interesting because he said, hey, by all accounts, Donovan is happy here. He'll be at the game tonight in Summer League. As you saw soon after Altman spoke, there was videos posted on Cavs Social of him and Myles Garrett working out together in Las Vegas, and Garrett was also in Summer League garb during Game 1 against the Brooklyn Nets in Las Vegas for Cleveland. But other than that, Altman just kind of stressed that, hey, by all accounts, he's happy here. And I think an interesting footnote that maybe not a lot of people are paying attention to is Altman did admit to the fact that, hey, we also have to prove to him it's worthwhile for him to commit to Cleveland long term. And it was an answer within a non-answer, because he's just yeah, we'll approach this conversation. If he doesn't agree to an extension, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, more or less, which I think is the correct way to tackle that question, because it can be hard to navigate that. But I did find it interesting the fact that he as an Altman did admit that hey, we do need to convince Donovan Mitchell it is worthwhile to commit likely your prime to Cleveland versus maybe going to a team like New York, or let's just say Miami or any other team that could be interested, or just is always somehow in the mix for disgruntled star players at the end of the day. So it's definitely a situation worth monitoring, I think, down the line, and things can evolve quite rapidly. But And by all accounts, Altman seems to have said like Mitchell's happy, and it's more so like on him, his staff, and maybe the Cavaliers organization to like convince him like, yeah, this is worth the squeeze for you.
That it is on the Cavs. Look, there will be financial considerations as well about where this goes. What Evan Mobley's contract looks like. You'll have to plan for a future Darius Garland contract. And look, we should note that too. This isn't. He is not like staring down the barrel of free agency either, which I think makes this feel less immediate. Let's use DeJounte Murray as a point of comparison. He just signed an extension with Atlanta. This was his upcoming season, his age 27 season, was going to be the last year of his contract. He would have been a free agent next summer. Atlanta gave up all the stuff for him, obviously. They kind of had, if they wanted to keep him, to pay him or flip him. Mitchell, you have a little bit of time. Now, if you get to the end of the season, maybe if you don't have that kind of success, that would make him happy, whatever it is. Then I think that's when the heat gets turned up a little bit, because that's when you're technically he all likely got 1 year left on his deal at that point based on his player option, and you'll kind of know where you're at a little bit then. And this year it will be, I think, kind of play a big part in this. I don't think it's the end of everything or all or nothing this year, but I do think this year is going to have a really big part on where this Mitchell discussion kind of goes. Yeah,
it definitely will. I just think no matter what, considering that a lot of us, including Donovan, thought he was going to be joining the New York Knicks last offseason, I think that's always just going to be linked to him. I think especially just with the Knicks playoff loss in the rearview mirror for Cleveland, and maybe Donovan just kind of gassing up the Knicks home crowd and kind of showing his heart on his sleeve that he is a New York boy through and through, and now weirdly has to wear a split Mets Guardians jersey for MLB All-Star. It's whatever. That's a can of worms we can open on a very late off-season episode, but
I will not touch that with a 10-foot pole. You can do that. I will not do that.
So yeah, it is on Cleveland. I think it's encouraging just by the fact that they were aggressive to open free agency. They bring in Max Strus, Ty Jerome, George Niang. Those are likely rotation guys. Ditto for Damian Jones as well, who could be like that 10th or 11th man in Cleveland's rotation. I think he really saw it just came into perspective, the lack of experience, but also just like the lack of depth on Cleveland's roster outside of Mitchell and Garland. And hopefully, maybe with the two assistant coaching changes, with Antonio Lang going to Atlanta and Josh Broghammer going to Dallas, like maybe Cleveland does bring in more of an offensive-minded coach to maybe add some creativity with this new shooting options the Cavs have added to their offense as well, just to kind of make them a little bit more dynamic and maybe make Mitchell's life a lot easier. And yeah, it's going to be interesting how they navigate this going forward. I think Cleveland is going to have to remain aggressive. Obviously, they're not going to mortgage everything to appease Donovan Mitchell. Like, there's only so much you can do before you realize, like, okay, this just isn't going to be a partnership that is viable long term. But in the meantime, like, if you're signing role players or just making sure you are doubling, maybe even tripling down on the big fish move you made last offseason, it's a pretty clear indication like Cleveland is committed to building a winner around Donovan Mitchell. And now they just kind of have to navigate the next steps and just see what this next season and probably the next postseason holds for Cleveland.
Coming up next, we're going to talk more about what Koby had to say specifically about the core four. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Ibotta. Ibotta is such a great way to save money, to make your purchases work for you. If you're looking to get some grilling stuff for grilling out this summer, to just have a good time, to buy a new summer wardrobe, you can have Ibotta help you with that. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns over $120 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use that cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, or at least some of it, and that game you're dying to go into, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. You can even earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is giving our listeners just $5 for trying Ibotta with the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use the code LOCK. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use the code. Coming back in here, Evan, I want to talk about something that when people talk about team building, and Koby Altman did sort of caveat what he said about this, but I want to hit on something that I just find funny. And I think I get why this happens. I get why we do this, the pejorative we. But a part of this, of what he had to say to me, is just funny. And I think anybody that uses the Denver Nuggets as a point of comparison, I think, is silly. I understand that team didn't blow it up. They didn't make crazy changes. They obviously were aggressive at the right spots and, traded a franchise mainstay in Monty Morris and brought in KCP and traded for Aaron Gordon after the Jeremy Grant thing. I don't think Denver is a model for anyone. And I know, he said Evan is not going to be Nikola Jokic. Evan Mobley is not going to be Nikola Jokic.
Thank you for clarifying. I also will not be Nikola Jokic. I'm not tall enough. I have the heart, I think, but
you're not tall enough in the past. You don't race horses.
Somewhat similar, maybe Eastern European political values, but we'll neither here nor there. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know where you're going with that, but okay. Denver as a model for anybody is crazy to me. Jokic makes that model possible. That's the model. The model is Jokic more than it is everything else. You wouldn't be patient if that team with Jamal Murray and if that Nurkic had been their center, you wouldn't be patient with that group. You'd be blowing it up.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. I think it is helpful just by the fact that Denver is a non-glamour market and they won the title recently. And to your point, they maintain the status quo of their core of Murray and Jokic. But they as in the Nuggets were certainly and also I think the Michael Porter Jr. pick just working out for them, especially because Porter Jr. did have some red flags with health concerns, but definitely panned out as a prospect for the Nuggets in I think the same draft class as Isaac Okoro, if I remember correctly. But
the Michael Porter Jr. was the Colin Sexton draft. He was 13. Yeah. So he was 13 in that draft. SGA went after. He was 14th, excuse me. Really, the last pick in the lottery that year.
So through the lens of Denver being a non-glamour market, small market, whatever you want to call it, team winning a championship, being one of the more recent examples other than Milwaukee, which is funnily enough a team JB Bickerstaff, I noted, saying that's what the Cavs need to copy. I can understand the logic of maybe the Cavs need to be more dynamic like Denver was in terms of, yes, you do have your guys like Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic for Denver, or you have Darius Garland and Evan Mobley as the homegrown draft talent for your team, and you give them the runway to develop and grow. Clearly, it's paid off with Garland pretty immediately on offense. Mobley, it's still a bit of a figuring out process, but the defensive upside is otherworldly with him. And you need to be able to have dynamic in the approach of acquiring stars. And I think Aaron Gordon's made a ton of sacrifices for Denver offensively, but he's just been such a huge defensive cog for them. You look at how like you said, Monty Morris was a guy that the Nuggets held dearly onto, where they had to sacrifice to get Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, which was a seamless fit next to Nikola Jokic. And you look at the lens from the Cavs, yeah, they were aggressive this offseason. Maybe they're getting their big name star. Again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, and things fall apart pretty quickly when you start doing stuff like this. But you maybe your third star you acquire through a trade is Aaron Gordon for Denver, Donovan Mitchell for Cleveland. Yeah, maybe you can make a small comparison there, but the Cavs at least aren't resting on their laurels. They aren't completely relying on just player development and just hoping that a team eventually manifests, because that's going to get you fired as a POBO or a GM. It's going to get you fired as a head coach if you're JB Bickerstaff, because owners will get impatient with losing and paying for the losing product every year. So I think it's smart being dynamic in that aspect. I don't think Cleveland is quite championship ready yet. There's still some flaws on this team. I am curious to see, is there an Isaac Okoro trade down the line that's in the works or something? Or do they continue making moves to round out and prove to Donovan Mitchell this is worthwhile? There's a lot of interesting threads, but I think it makes sense of saying, like, yeah, it's a small market team that realizes, like, hey, we're not going to get the big name free agents lining up to sign with us, so we had to make trades and find guys that, one, want to be here, and two, want to commit long term once they get a taste of, like, winning within our system. Like, that makes sense. But Nikola Jokic is arguably the best player in basketball right now. Jamal Murray is a top 5 point guard, in my opinion, especially after his bounce back from his injury. The Cavs still have a lot of growing to do to get to Denver's place, but I understand maybe the thought process behind it. It's just maybe you're setting expectations a little too high when you need to come down a couple notches before you get there.
Yeah, look, if Denver hadn't, at certain points, if things hadn't gone right for Denver, Mike Mullen's getting fired, someone's getting traded, like, winning kind of fixes some of this. And again, like Donovan Mitchell is great. Darius Garland is great. They have not shown to be at the level of Jokic, and that Jokic changes this whole conversation. Like, you build teams around those guys, you maximize what those guys are. That's your system to me. I am for building a culture, something that Cavs are really preach. I am for investing in an organization to make things sustainable, but none of it matters unless you have guys that are great. All right, one more break. Come back. Evan's going to pitch me on Christian Wood. Evan, sell me on Christian Wood, who remains a free agent. The Athletic has reported, Joe Embuha over there has reported that the Lakers are interested in him. His market obviously has not netted him nearly the money he was making on his last deal. So what is your look at Christian Wood?
Christian Wood's an interesting player. I think he is certainly like a success story just because he went from Philly to Charlotte he bounced around a lot, then really flashed with Detroit, and it just hasn't necessarily worked out for him since then, whether it's with his time at the Pistons or his time at the Rockets. And it felt like the Rockets had buyer's remorse from the moment they got him, and ditto for Dallas. And Christian Wood is an offensive dynamo at the big man spot. I think he certainly has the youth and athleticism to fit in with Cleveland, and it's been floated that like maybe a team takes a stab at him with part of an exception, not like become a tax team or have to deal with that, because I don't think teams are going to go over the tax for Christian Wood. Or maybe he signs for a vet min, like prove it type deal, and then he re-enters the market next year. And if Cleveland, who has 2 roster spots, and yes, they did acquire Damian Jones, were to get Christian Wood, the optics behind it of it being like a cheaper contract, maybe it's a shorter term deal, makes a lot of sense for me, because we were talking about it a bit, like if Bobby Portis was somehow available, like a guy in that vein who Wood isn't the same player as Portis, but like there are some similarities, like an offensive 4-5 that can pair nicely next to Mobley or Allen, and maybe kind of just juice up and beef up even more what like George Niang is giving you. That makes sense. It's just how far does Cleveland want to go into this? And as you mentioned, like the Los Angeles is in the conversation. Does Christian Wood want to maybe go play for the Lakers where he has a more prominent role, or would he want to come to Cleveland where maybe his role isn't as defined, just heading into this upcoming season?
So I just don't think Wood's that good. He puts up good numbers.
It is an inferior material. I think the current modern era brick and mortar is better. So
I don't think Christian Wood is that like effective. Like he can score. That's great. He's got good size. Okay, but like this is not someone who's going to be someone that can maybe be like another center for you in the playoffs. He's a really bad defender, and I think if I was putting myself in, and look, he went to Dallas last year and it just like didn't work, and like for whatever reason, that's like, I don't know, that's kind of a red flag. Like his best season was very clearly this year where he was trying to get himself paid. Okay, like he was 25. He has not really had like a productively good NBA season in the 3 years since. Like he just hasn't been as good. Like he hasn't.
In a 3 year sense, yeah. Say like that last season of Detroit, he was pretty effective, but that was also a very bad Pistons team.
He averaged 21, and so he had good numbers that got him some intrigue on a small minute sample that last year. Puts up 20 a game with the Rockets. I misspoke, in 2021, and then from there it hasn't been good. I just think he's a bad big stats like bad team guy. I think defensively, just like a bad defender. And if I'm putting myself in Koby Altman and Mike Gaines's shoes, they have, and Damian Jones is like a different version of this very slightly, like the formula's tweaked a little bit. But if you look at the centers they have gone after in recent years, it is guys who contest and block shots, who don't commit a lot of fouls and who are like just going to be pretty solid for you in that specific way. Damian Jones is a more athletic version of that profile. He fouls a little bit more, but he also gives you more offensive utility as a vertical spacer. Christian Wood, it would be like a bet if you hadn't already filled that spot to me. I just kind of am like, Like the Lakers, I get it. Like they kind of need another center. They're kind of signaling they want to have different looks in addition to Jackson Hayes. I don't think Cleveland is a team that's in need of that. I just don't think he's like, this is very much a player that I think if you, after like 5 games, JB Bickerstaff, like I have to play him. Just, this does not strike me as like, as a Bickerstaff kind of player.
That's a fair argument. I think your through line with Damian Jones and maybe the type of backup fives or just backup bigs in general Cleveland has pursued, whether it's Damian Jones through trade, Robin Lopez, Ed Davis, maybe even Moses Brown, I guess, as well. Guys that are low risk, maybe somewhat higher reward compared to the risk, but like you're not going to get much from it. And it's a guy that's going to play 10 to 15 minutes a night. And that's what I was getting at, is like Christian Wood comfortable with having that type of role because he is in his mid-20s, as you noted. There was a lot of questions about his defensive capabilities as a player. And would he take a very smaller role and kind of risk financial stability going forward, or go to a situation like Los Angeles, as you said, where he can be either the starting 5 next to Anthony Davis, or he backs up Jackson Hayes, but he provides you that stretchiness off the bench for the Lakers. So like that makes more sense, like fit wise. And as you said, like if they didn't go get Damian Jones, who certainly fits the mold of Robin Lopez, Ed Davis, etc., that makes more sense. And also, the Cavs are going to give most of, if not all of their minutes at the bigs position to Mobley and Allen, with like a little bit left over for Damian Jones, and I'd imagine George Niang gets most of, if not all of his minutes at the 4 as well. So like a lot of the minutes are kind of spoken for in Cleveland's rotation, and I would take a stab at Wood if it was like on a vet min deal and it didn't work out. Like it's a pretty easy, just like, okay, just move on from this situation. Like if you're getting serious money, that's where it gives me pause, because the defensive issues are concerning. And also, like you said, I can definitely understand the argument of he's a volume player on a bad team type of guy, where he takes advantage of nobody else being able to make the shots, and he's just a dude who's going to eat on bad teams. The Cavs, every NBA team has a player or has experience with a player like that. So yeah, if the Cavs didn't get Damian Jones,
would you prefer if you could pick one of them? Would you pick Damian Jones, or would you pick Christian Wood?
So with George Niang in the equation, I think I'd pick Damian Jones, because you're asking Jones to play 10 or 15 minutes. Christian Wood isn't going to give you much in those 10 or 15 minutes. He needs more than that to actually function. And like you said, if you didn't have Jones, maybe if you didn't even have Niang on the roster too, like you're like, okay, he's going to be like our 4 or 5 and a guy who like is our 7th, 8th man in the rotation that has to be paired with one of Mobley or Allen to like kind of function as a defensive liability. Yeah, you can make a bit of that argument to me. But right now, just based on what Cleveland has done already this offseason, I would pick Jones 8 times out of 10.
I would pick Jones.
What about you?
I would pick Jones every. I think he gives you something you really know what he is, and I'm just not a Christian Wood believer. I don't think that is someone, like I could see in a pinch if you had to. Let's say Jared Allen has an injury, or like there's foul trouble and you needed to play Damian Jones at a playoff game for 10 minutes for a series and just make it work. I think you could do it. I don't think you could defensively with Christian Wood. He's not particularly aware, doesn't move his feet well, he's going to get attacked, he doesn't, like that is a guy who's just all about the buckets, and I get there's value in that. There's something to be said for like that kind of player. It's just, it doesn't strike me as something Cleveland would want, or I don't really get how it is additive. Look, if it was a vet min and his market has collapsed, that's one thing. You know, we're in a weird spot. Let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Back at you tomorrow. We're going to talk all about Summer League. And really, I think about Isaiah Mobley has been maybe the popping guy for the Cavs so far in Vegas. Until then, talk to y'all. Have a great rest of your day.